Before we get into our next section, we kind of rushed at the end of last week talking about Luther's 3 treatises during 1520. We give you a chance if you have questions or thoughts following up on that. We kind of rushed, but I want to keep on moving into 1521. So this is we might say one of the big events in this year, the Diet of Worms. Out of all of Luther's life, even more, I think this one more significant than the nailing of the 95 Theses, only because that one starts things off. But really, Luther here at Worms, and then from there, probably the Diet of Augsburg 10 years or 9 years later, are probably the kind of these pivotal moments in Luther's life and in the Reformation. So, recall that he had been, we had those 3 treatises, but then the excommunication had come through, and that January of 1521, here is the final decree of excommunication. So Luther's excommunicated, but that's with the church, right? What he's going to be facing here is before the state, before the government. This is a meeting not of the church leaders, even though there's church representation here. There's a mixing of them. But this is an official meeting of the empire, of the government, before the emperor, who had recently been elected. Remember, we talked about the elector, the emperor had died, and that was why they needed, and the Pope needed the support of Duke Frederick, because he was influential in that election. So this is going to have a diet. And now, when people see this in Americans, they look at Diet of Worms. That doesn't sound... okay, so first, Worms is the city. And if you say Worms, then we don't think of the... I could talk to you about worms if you wanted to, but different thing. Worms is down here. And we got, Eisleben, Wittenberg. So this is quite a journey. And you recall the dangerous situation of someone who is in trouble with the church, of going to some conference or some council or some meeting and never either getting there or never coming home. There was a very good chance for this. So, but the diet, it's in Worms. Diet, the word comes from the Latin word dies, die, which means day. Similar to in German, what they called this was the Reichstag. You see the Tag is the word for day there. It was a term for the meeting. Of course, it was not just one day. This meeting took place over several months. When they did things. They didn't abbreviate things. So they met from January up until May was this diet. Luther's going to be there during April. So it's going to start, and for various reasons, you've got the emperor presiding over it. A number of things that the empire has to decide. This wasn't the only issue. There's just general threats, government regulation, and how the government was run was to be decided there. You had the threat of Turks coming in up to Austria, towards Austria. They needed troops and taxes to fight against France. And then you've got this matter of religious differences, which was pivotal to being able to deal with these. Because if he doesn't have a united empire, it's much harder to gather money and troops and so on. And so why does the government need to resolve this? It affects other things besides this. So in this diet, the people that are there, you've got the electors of the Holy Roman Empire, you've got the emperor, the princes, representatives of imperial cities. So depending on the kind of city or territory, you had different kinds of rulers there. So it was a bunch of princes. Representatives from Rome were there. Aleander, we've heard of him before, and he's kind of the one, he's going to be the one who's writing. They want to condemn Luther before he even comes. They don't even want to invite him. They just want to condemn him outright. But all the German princes are going to say, you can't do that. This is one of our citizens. You can't condemn him without a trial, right? So the fact that he's even invited to come to this was something that they had to fight for. They would have just decreed and banned him right from the start. So in February of that year, they decide to invite him or summon him. That's the first quotation on the page under Diet of Worms, where Luther is summoned to Worms through a safe conduct. And there, of course, John Hus at the Council of Constance also had safe conduct, but he didn't make it home. So take that with a grain of salt. And when they say you've got safe conduct, he is to be heard through learned specialists. That is, he is to be asked. What this means is when we say we're going to hear him, he's going to be asked whether he will abide in it with his writings, with their content or not. Beyond that, nothing. This is not to be a debate. They make this very clear. There is to be no disputation. If he recants, he shall be treated with grace. If he remains obstinate, then the Kaiser's mandate against him will be executed. In some ways, he's judged already. The only question is whether he's going to persist in what he's teaching or not. He's already judged that his teaching is wrong. That's a given from the start. So he's got 21-day safe conduct to get there. And this is kind of done as a concession, like we've said. The emperor needs Frederick the Wise. And so he's going to give him things like that and give him troops to protect Luther on the way there. Of course, on the way there, there are plots against Luther. One of them, though, one of the plots, I think, if I understand it correctly, they're plotting to get him not to come. Like to convince him that they would take him into safekeeping, like because he had to stop at a number of places along the way. And they were going to, these are some of the people that were seemingly on the side. They were going to get him to say, look, we can get you out and keep you safe, and you can kind of be a fugitive and run, and we'll keep you safe because you might not be safe if you keep on going. So they talk him into that, and then as soon as they do that, then they were going to capture him and wait to collect a bounty on him. His elector, Frederick, he's the one who arranges the safe conduct, but he's not thrilled that he's going because he's not sure he's going to be actually safe. Like I said, Aleander, he wanted to institute the ban right away before he even came. So he comes, he leaves Wittenberg in April 2nd. He arrives there on the 16th. And as he's going, it's kind of, not that you make a parallel between the two, but you know how Jesus enters into Jerusalem with this grand procession, and as he's approaching Jerusalem, that crowd starts to gather. That's kind of happening with Luther. He's got this crowd of people that are going with him. By the time he gets to Worms, when he comes in, the soldiers, 100 horsemen, come out, riding out with blaring trumpets. And he kind of enters into the city of Worms like a hero, like at a parade. And of course, then the leaders in the city, or the imperial rulers, they hear all this commotion. And the people he's a very popular figure already. So this is a copy. Here's a bigger version of this. The actual summons, I think this is an extant, not this is a scan, of course, but that's an extant actual copy of the summons from the empire. You've got, though, so the next quotation, this is Luther talking, recalling this in his table talk, recalling what this was like when he entered into the city, or he was coming up to it. He says, when I came into the neighborhood of Worms, I was warned by Spalatin lest I throw myself into grave danger. At the same time I wrote back, even though there should be as many devils in Worms as shingles on the roof, I would still enter. He knew he was going into danger, but he says, no, you can't keep me away. I'm going to go in. Like we've said before, Luther fully expected to be killed throughout his life, and probably a little bit towards the end, a little disappointed maybe that he wasn't. Then he wrote, so April 14th. So remember, he gets there April 16th. So I guess this is on the way. He writes a letter to George Spalatin. We come, my dear Spalatin, though Satan has tried to prevent me through illness. For the whole way from Eisenach to here, I have been very weak, and am still much weaker than I have ever felt before. But I also perceive that the Emperor Charles' mandate has been printed in order to fill me with fear. But Christ lives, and we shall enter Worms in defiance of the gates of hell and all the powers of the air. When once there, we shall see what is to be done, and Satan need not puff himself up, for we have every intention of frightening and despising him. So get a lodging ready for me. It's just this confidence, even though he has no idea what's going to happen. It is very not unreasonable at all to imagine that he is just arrested and then he's done. He's killed or just imprisoned for the rest of his life for all he knew. That's 2 days before he appears, or 3 days. Then, so on April 17th, it's interesting that they put him, it's like at the end of the business day. Like they probably had spent all day in meetings and they just want to be done by this point. But both of the days, the first day, April 17th, he appears there with his lawyer. Empire, I'm guessing, provided a lawyer for him. He's only asked 2 questions. He's made it very clear. We're no debating here. We're just, you get 2 questions, and we're just looking for an answer. You've seen that. You've seen that if you ever watch any kind of like congressional hearings or something like that, and they're, and the congressmen or senators are asking questions of the person they don't really answer, and so then they just say, well, so that's a no. It's just very tense, and they don't want to debate. They don't want an answer. They just want a yes or no. And then they give a question that is a yes or no. Are you still beating your wife? Yes or no. Yes or no. Where you can't just answer yes or no. Anyhow. All right, so the question first, are these your books? And his lawyer suggests to me, and says, have them read the books out loud. Read the name of the books, list them, so that we have it all in the record. And so they read all the books that he has written, pamphlets and everything like that, and he says, yes, those are all mine. Will you recant? And then he basically is allowed a reprieve. He says, this is a big question. Not all these books are the same, and so if I deny all of them, am I denying, can I do that? So I need some time to think about this. And they grant him 24 hours to give, but they qualify. It says your answer needs to be out loud, don't write it. You need to give out loud. There's a artist depiction of the event. The movie, I'll show you a clip in a minute, but I won't show the assemblage. The 2003 Luther movie. One of the best things about that movie was the costuming, I think. Just as it looks so much like the artwork from that day, the regalia that the princes would have had and the type of clothes. So the next day, 24 hours later in the evening, but there's such a crowd that they need to meet in a bigger room. They meet in a bigger room, but it's still crowded. And apparently, like when Luther finally answers, there is kind of some shouting, and they've got an order in the court kind of thing, try to contain control. So again, they come back to him, says, so you've had time to think. What's your answer? And he says, they said, we want an answer without horns or evasions. No trickery. We're looking basically for a yes or no. Will you recant these writings? And then he answers, and that's the next quote on the sheet is Luther's speech. I guess I don't know what we're reliant on are people writing this down as it's happening, but especially when you get towards the end, it got pretty loud in there, and so it's not always clear how it ended. So the line towards the end where it says, "Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise," a lot of the accounts don't have that in it. That's what it has on this. This is the statue that's in Worms, where this took place, and it says, "Here I stand, I can do no other. God help me, amen." That "here I stand, I can do no other." Whether he actually said that, or maybe he just mumbled it under his breath, and it wasn't recorded by the official record, I don't know. But he says, "Unless I am convinced by the testimonies of the Holy Scriptures or evident reason," and that's an important little part there. He says, "I'm going to be convinced by Scripture or on the basis of reasonable argument." like what he was saying, that the other side wasn't even reasonable. And he wanted to, that was part of a debate that you do to determine that these things don't make sense. It's interesting because Jesus in the gospel for today kind of does that same thing when he points out, so that Jesus drives out a demon, and the Jews, the Pharisees, like, he casts out demons by Beelzebub. He's casting out devils by the devil. And Jesus points out, like, basically his argument is that's crazy. That doesn't make sense. That's contrary to reason when he says, well, a kingdom divided against itself can't stand. He's making a reasonable, rational argument there. He says, your argument that I'm driving out demons by devil, that doesn't make sense. And then he goes on to say other things. So it's not the only thing that he says, but that he appeals also to reason. Unless I'm convinced by the testimonies of the Holy Scriptures or evident reason, for I believe neither in the Pope nor councils alone, since it has been established that they have often erred and contradicted themselves. They have gone contrary to reason by contradicting, by saying two different things. And reason says two contradictory things can't be true at the same time. If they contradict, they can't both be true. And so they've done that. And so we can't rest our case on just what the Pope said or what the Council said. I am bound by the Scriptures adduced by me, and my conscience has been captive by the Word of God, and I am neither able nor willing to recant, since it is neither safe nor right to act against conscience. Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise. God help me. Amen. I'm going to show you a clip from that movie. It's like just his little speech here. Just let you see.
Unless I am convinced by Scripture and by plain reason, and not by popes and councils who have so often contradicted themselves. My conscience is captive to the Word of God. To go against conscience is neither right nor safe. I cannot, and I will not, recant. Here I stand. I can do no other. God help me.
That depiction has it's so much quieter than the old one. You should watch it. You can find it on YouTube. The 1950s black and white one. In that one, goodness, we should. Who knows what things we want to watch next? The old one has him much more fiery. He's like, I cannot, and his eyes are bulging out of his head. I kind of like that one better. It's a little bit more dramatic, and I will not recant. He's a very he looks a little bit crazy though, but this one has him very kind of thoughtful. I don't know how he presented that exactly, but.
Do we know what that 24-hour period was like for Luther? Did he have all this confidence, or was he wrestling around?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to remember if I have read Luther talking about that time period. I don't recall. I think I've seen it depicted maybe in this film, where he really is. He's wrestling. He's, what's he going to say? I don't think he has any idea that he's going to actually recant. I don't think that even enters his mind. But of what do I say? How do I defend it? Realizing, of course, that this could be it. Yeah. I mean, I still think there's hope, but he thinks there's still hope. That somehow he is convincing people. It's just not the people in authority. Or that authority, So, following that, yeah, apparently the Spaniards, I don't know who what contingent from Spain, they're like, to the fire, burn them. They're like the crowds in Monty Python when they want to burn the witch. There's actually some similarities, because he's a heretic. How do you know he's a heretic? Because they float. I don't know. Luther is said to have said, "I'm through." Like he felt like getting through this was like getting through the fire. To stand there before the prince and all he actually know how he says, like, it is not neither right nor safe to go against conscience. Like, conscience is captive to the word of God. I can't. And Aleander, he says, just set that aside. Just you got to get over that silly conscience bit. So then there's a bunch of meetings afterwards to try to with him and others. They're trying to sort things out, and he thinks that they're gonna maybe actually have a conversation about it, but that doesn't happen. He's just sort of bored sitting around there. And by the 25th, he asks to be able to go home, and he's allowed to, and he leaves Worms on the 26th of April. While they're working on... Do you have a question? Just...
Not to take anything away from the danger he's in, because it's a lot of it in, but, and I missed last month's teaching, so you were talking about the John Luce.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To what extent is Luther more popular, wrote more than that one, who was easier to kill, and now with feudalism and the Holy Roman Empire and the kings and princes, or the princes and the emperor, the Pope needs them. Is he practicing restraint not to kill Luther?
Their things are different. It certainly is. Luther is more popular, so there would be more backlash if he were executed at this point. Also, he has like princes on his side. Not as many here. If they wanted to kill him, this would have been the time to do it. They missed their opportunity. Remember, so 9 years later, they're going to be standing in front of the same emperor, but now it's going to be all the princes of Germany united in this teaching. Here he's standing alone. He does have supporters, but and because he's got the support of his prince, that's a really key individual, because he has the support of his prince and other rulers, that there's consequences if they don't honor the safe conduct. But you're going to see from the edict that safe conduct is going to go away. He's going to be an enemy of the state now, following this decree. And so it really he'd be fair game for anyone. In fact, we'll pay you, you get a bounty on him. All right, so he's going to leave. Afterward, so there's the edict. It takes a while. There's a delay. I don't know all the details, why it doesn't get out. Finally published, I think it's signed or the decree is written up May 8th or something like that. It's finally published on the 26th. But they backdate it to the 8th, the day that they like agreed on it. The decree, and I printed out a bunch of I read through the whole edict, and it's really harsh, and it's all aimed at him and going through. You can find it online. This is towards the end of it. In the end, the charge is treason, which is interesting. That's a charge, a criminal charge for his as a heretic is treason. We have declared and hereby forever declare this edict that the said Martin Luther is to be considered an estranged member, rotten and cut off from the body of our Holy Mother Church. He is an obstinate, schismatic heretic, and we want him to be considered as such by all of you. There's a lot of this edict that is instructive towards all the people, the way that they're supposed to treat him now. So it wasn't just like, we condemn him, but we're like telling all the people who have his books, you need to get rid of the books too. For this reason, we forbid anyone from this time forward to dare, either by words or by deeds, to receive, defend, sustain, or favor the said Martin Luther. On the contrary, we want him to be apprehended and punished as a notorious heretic, as he deserves, to be brought personally before us, or to be securely guarded until those who have captured him inform us, whereupon we will order the appropriate manner of proceeding against the said Luther. So arrest him, capture him, and then we'll figure out what we're going to finally do with him, which I think they already know. Those who will help in his capture will be generously rewarded for their good work. So there's a bounty on him now. As for his accomplices, those who help or favor the said Martin in whatever manner, or who show obstinacy in their perversity, not receiving absolution from the Pope for the evils they have committed, we will also proceed against them, and will take all of their goods and belongings, movable and fixed, with the help of either of the judges in the area in which they reside, or of our parliaments and councils at Malines, or in other cities in which these events are made known. Action will be taken according to the desire of the accusers or of our fiscal procurators, but always according to the Constitution and the laws, whether canon, civil, or divine, written against those who commit heresy or the crime of high treason. These laws will be applied regardless of person, degree, or privilege, if anyone does not obey our edict in every manner. So that includes the princes. If the princes harbor him, they are to be, for this reason, we want all of Luther's books to be universally prohibited and forbidden, and we also want them to be burned, which would also include, so this is before this, but eventually, all of everything that he writes, including his hymns. So that's why it was illegal to sing Luther's hymns. Even in the streets, you could be arrested. People were arrested. So there's the edict. He is now officially an outlaw and can be captured and expected to. Now he's given that 21-day safe conduct, dated from, I can't remember when they dated it from, but they, again, backdating the edict, that only gave him, less time to get home safe, or wherever. But on the way, or prior to this, apparently, there was they knew that this was going to come, and so it looks like instigated by the Elector Frederick. Don't really know who else was in on the plot to have him captured on the way home. It seems that Luther had a hint, at least, that something was going to happen. Yeah, so April 28th, so what did we say? He leaves on April 26th. So he's on the way. After he's left, stops for the night, and he writes a letter to Lucas Cranach, the artist, guy who drew that painting out there in the hall. You've seen Lucas Cranach's paintings around. He writes to him, and he says, "I shall submit to being hidden away, and as yet do not know where." So he knew something was going to happen. He was going to have to go into hiding, but he had no involvement specifically in the arrangements. "I would have preferred being put to death by the tyrants, especially by the furious Herzog George, but was obliged to follow the advice of friends and wait my time. They did not expect me to go to Worms, and you all know how they kept faith with me as to the conduct, demanding that my writings should be delivered up. I imagined His Imperial Majesty would have assembled many doctors," this is what he thought would happen, "who would overcome me in a straightforward manner, but they only cried, 'Are these books yours?' 'Yes.' 'Will you retract them or not?' 'No.' 'Then get away.'" It's like he expected a lot more, and it was kind of anticlimactic for him. And it says, so later in May, after this, he says, "Amsdorf knew, of course, that I was to be captured by somebody, but does not know the place of my captivity." So he wasn't in on the details of it. So what happens is they leave, and they're accompanied by a group of soldiers from Worms that are to go, and they get, at one point, they go into the Thuringian forest. That's the route that they're taking home. And at some point, they get maybe to a border or something like that, or a town, and they head off, or go back to Worms. And so now it's just three left. It's Luther, it's the coach driver, and no, it's four. Amsdorf is with him, and then another monk that's with them. And they're riding along, and all of a sudden knights start riding up from different directions, shouting, holding, I suppose, pointing arrows at them. Ask them who, is one, who are you? Is one of you Luther? The monk that was with him just took off and ran into the woods. And so supposedly Luther said maybe to Amsdorf, he says, "Don't worry, we're among friends." Like he kind of whispered to that, like he suspected that this was what was going on. But they cover him up, throw something over Luther's head. So that the people who are with him don't realize that what is going on. They think he's been captured too. Like they're trying to make it convincing that he's being captured by an enemy group. They only take Luther. Amsdorf and the coachman are left to go. So the coachman couldn't, as far as he knew, he had been captured by some, who knows who. They take him away. The others leave the others go. And then they go from there to the Wartburg. They sneak him in. They put him into a cell, which was kind of a room. And they think if you can go there and you can see supposedly the room that he was stored in. Yeah, here's a artist depiction of that. Arrest him, take him to the Wartburg Castle. And then there's the room in which they say that this was his room. And then there's it was used oftentimes for kind of high profile political prisoners. So it was kind of a sort of a prison cell in a sense. But they had to hide him out until they could disguise him. So like they sneak him in so that no one else living in this castle knows that he's there. No one can know. Even so, probably Frederick the Wise, the prince, is the one who arranged all of this, but even he did not know. Because if he did, then he would be responsible for, so that he could, even if he was like tortured and compelled to give it up, he couldn't. He didn't know where he was. So however this took place, it was quite an involved process. They get him in. He has to stay in there for quite a while. He has to let his hair grow out, his tonsure. The monks have that special hairdo. He has to let it grow out, grow a beard. They dress him like a knight. I think they even give him some lessons on knighthood, and so that he could pass off as they call Junker George, Knight George, in the Wartburg. So this painting that hangs on the wall here, that was done later. That was done when Luther went back to Wittenberg in December for a little. He got out. He played hooky and he went back to Wittenberg for a little bit of time. But he knocks on the door, and I think it was Spalatin, one of his friends, didn't even recognize him. So that's how well he was disguised during that time. His health gets better. He writes from there that he was not sleeping or he was sick, but over time he calls this his kingdom of the birds. He's up high and he in the castle, and he works. So like he knew this was coming. Like he had books with him, some books with him. Like he brought his Greek books with him. So it wasn't like totally like when he was captured. Can I bring my Greek with me So he's got some reading to do. He's studying. Eventually, he's going to work on getting to the translation. We'll talk about that next week, the translation of the New Testament. Questions or thoughts on that? Oh, this is that. I mentioned. So this painting then of him as a knight, that's done by Cranach. So when he goes back to Wittenberg, he meets up with Cranach for a bit so he can take his picture in a beard. So he is there from May 1521 to March 1522. So for 10 months, with that little stint in December that he gets to go back and back quick trip to Wittenberg. He kind of sneaks out, and then comes back. It was very limited to the people that were able to come in and out of where he was. Again, they were trying to keep this a secret from everyone, and so it had to maintain secrecy through that whole thing. But he was anxious to be there. He's writing a lot of letters back and forth. But he's like, I'm not in the middle of it. And he wanted to get back. He was very itching to get back really quickly. So he's brushing up on his languages there, writing letters, writing commentaries, writing on the Psalms. Does take at least one hunting trip, but that doesn't really go so well for him, I think. He said, there's some comment about, I think I should leave the hunting to someone else. I'm going to hunt something else. He writes there a number of things. And then eventually getting to the New Testament. Writes about monastic vows. So he doesn't really stop during this time. We've got a couple of other quotes of him talking about or about them. There's that quote from Myconius. Myconius was a contemporary acquaintance of Luther. He wrote later on, "Never has a case been reported in which a plot like this was kept so secret as to who did capture Luther and lead him away. Many people at the Diet also believed that it was a real captivity. So well was the secret kept." So they really had no idea where he was. And Luther later on also, recollecting, as I in the year 1521, the castle at the Wartburg, sat in my Patmos. So remember, John, the evangelist, writes that he's exiled to the island of Patmos where he writes Revelation. And so Luther calls this his Patmos. "I was far removed from people in a room, and no one could come to me except two noble sons who twice daily brought me something to eat and to drink. Once they brought me a sack of hazelnuts, which I at times ate, but the rest of the time I kept locked in my chest. When I wished to retire, I undressed in my living room, put out the light, went into the little sleeping room, and went to bed." So you'd think it would be like a vacation for him, but he, of course, wasn't content to just... What else do you want to know? I expected to talk about Worms for longer. We could talk a little bit about his translation of the New Testament. So he does that while he's there. It gets completed later, published, I think it's 1532, so not for a while yet. But that's hard work, translating is. And he's writing to people, like looking for words, looking for the words for something. He says, "I'm looking for a word for this." And so he'll write to someone and says, "What's the best word in German to express this idea?" Or send me more books. I need more books. I need to have the copies that I needed.
How long does he stay in this room?
Well, at the Wartburg, he's there for the 10 months. Whether things loosened up or not, I don't know. Where it says that no one was allowed in or out except for two boys to bring food. I don't know if that was the whole time. Obviously, he was able to get out if he went hunting one time. Joe?
So, where it says here, Luther's books, we want them all to be prohibited, forbidden, and also burned. So were they all burned?
Wherever they could be. So I would imagine that they would have gone through areas, imperial authorities go through and try to find them, and arrest anyone who had them, who had possession of them. If they refused to give them up, would be arrested or could be arrested. I don't recall stories, but I'm sure there are some, of people for whom that happened, because these were widely distributed. And, and just to think about that, the fact that we still have any of these means that they didn't all get burned. So some of them existed, although I imagine that makes it more difficult for early, Luther writings to have access to them, because anything that he wrote technically was illegal. And so the Edict of Worms during Luther's lifetime was never revoked. So his whole lifetime, this was in place. So the rest of his life, anywhere he went, he could be arrested. Chuck?
But he wrote the large Spanish. Wrote the small. Did he transform that into the small catechism?
Yeah, those are both him. And the large catechism came first, as in the form of sermons. Those are going to come later. That's going to be 1528, 1529. So another 8 years yet. But yes, he writes them both in the large catechism first, that's in the form of sermons, and then the short catechism in connection with the visitations. We'll talk about that when we get there, where they go around visiting the churches, and they're like, these people don't know anything, and so then he puts this catechism together as a simple way for them to teach the basics of the faith. Yeah, that's him. Jesse?
Did you already discuss John Steadfast? His brother?
We have not. Yeah.
Are you going to?
Yeah. He'll play more prominently in the upcoming ones. Yep.
Is he brings out this time also?
I should know that for sure. And I think that he actually does he actually follow Frederick? I think he comes later on. And so like at the time, I believe of the Diet of Augsburg, he's the Steadfast. Yeah. So pivotal, and like I said, with this not ever being undone, this is kind of the moment where is this going to just be snuffed out? I would say too. I mean, I think by 1530 it was almost impossible for them with the support that they had from the princes. That's going to build over this next decade, and for him. So what happens? In short, while he's away back in Wittenberg, Andreas Bodenstein from Karlstadt is his name. He gets the idea that all of these they were going to make reforms here in Wittenberg, and including things like we're gonna take off our vestments for the mass, and we're going to do those in our street clothes, and everyone's going to call. He insists that they call him Brother Andreas. Don't call me Pastor. Call me Pastor Andy. He's going to institute communing in both kinds. He's going to give people the cup too, which Luther was in favor of eventually. But but what he did is they forced it on people and said, all of a sudden now we're going to do all this, and there's breaking of statues and stained glass, and a lot of the stuff in the churches in Wittenberg got destroyed as a part of almost rioting. Insisting on these, and Luther, when he finally does come back, what did we say? He comes back in May to whatever that was, to March. Comes back in March, and he writes 8 sermons. So he comes back right at the beginning of Lent. And for 8 days in a row, he preaches sermons about how what they were doing was not right, of destroying the images and against these radical changes. And they're what they call his invocavit sermons. So you've seen that on the Ordo Invocavit, the first Sunday in Lent, a couple weeks ago. And so the 8 days, all the days, Invocavit Sunday and following, he's preaching these sermons about, included, in these is where Luther writes about how, he says, when you think of Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross, your mind can't help forming an image in your mind of Jesus on the cross, right? And he says that'd be a good thing for you to meditate on, that image of Jesus on the cross. He says if it's not a sin for you to have that in your mind, why would it be a sin for you to have that in your eyes? Why would it be wrong for you to have a picture of Jesus on the cross for you to meditate upon, in making it a case for not destroying and not getting rid of the images and such? So things like that. He preaches 8 days in a row when he comes back, and that's...
What time did he do the 95?
1517. So 4 years before this. There's a copy on the back when we were going through. There's a copy of the 95 Theses back there. Yep. So this is after this. That's kind of what gets this whole thing started. Yep. What else? Usually I don't have extra time, but a lot of like when we were going through this at the seminary, my class notes, like we went through this event first, and then we kind of went back through a bunch of other stuff, just because this moment is so pivotal. Forget how to talk. In the whole Reformation.
He also wrote the evening.
In the Catechism. Yep. That's part of the Catechism. Yep. Yeah. Other questions? John?
If they knew they wanted to capture him, why let him go? Why didn't they just hold him?
My best guess would be political fallout. Is while they were there, the emperor had given his word to Frederick, maybe. And if he did that, the political consequences of that, maybe. That'd be my best guess, that he had given him this safe conduct, and then they'd given them safe conduct afterwards, like ahead of time. He had promised that he would do that, and then, well, so after he left, that wrangling and that delay, the one side, Aleander, they wanted to, I told you, he wanted to put him under the ban before he even came. Well, after he had left, or after the thing was over, he wanted to say he's condemned right away. But the German princes, they refused to let them issue that edict without their approval. So there was some turf war going on, where even if some of these, they might not have agreed with Luther, they said, but he's our citizen. He's a German. You're not a German, Charles. Like even though you're in, so there's turf war. So I think that's probably a big part of it, that the insistence that you can't come here and condemn one of ours without our approval. And eventually they do give it to him. When the edict was, it wasn't a unanimous decision by whoever was the voting body that did it. It wasn't unanimous. I think it was like four and then 2 abstained or something. I don't know, like it passed and it went out, but it wasn't unanimous. So and Frederick was one of those people, and he abstained from the decision. I suppose though that was dicey for him though too, because if he votes against the edict, and if he's known even as a prince as a supporter, now they give this edict that says it is illegal to support this man, and anyone who supports him, anyone who harbors him, any accomplice that he has, is under the same ban. And like I said, it was never withdrawn. So for the rest of his life, this is again why he can't go to Augsburg. He has to stay within the territory where he can be protected. He does end up traveling quite a bit within the territory, within the place where he's protected. But then there's more support as time goes on, more princes. If not, anything else? We can close with hymn, On My Heart Imprint Your Image.